Welcome to Hope is Here. My name is Greg Horn. We are kicking off a new series on Mondays and Tuesdays for the next 6 weeks called Who is This Man? And we're going to be looking at Jesus, of course. And, it's amazing. Over 2,000 years later after Jesus' death, we're still talking about him. Obviously, our birthdays, they depend on that. It's either before Christ or AD, after death. And as we completed that series, the faith of our foundation, looking at our authority, which is the Bible, looking at salvation, God's gift of grace to us. We looked at our lifeline to God, prayer. We looked at the Holy Spirit, the comforter and the counselor that God's provided for us as followers of Jesus. And then we looked at stewardship, how we can be good stewards with our time, talent, treasures that God's entrusted us with. And just want to follow up with that because obviously Jesus was a game changer when God said, hey, I'm coming down in the flesh, okay, and that you can be in relationship with me through a personal relationship with my son, Jesus. And so we're going to be looking at him over the next 6 weeks. We're going to look at things such as the man who redefined greatness, the man who redefined love, the man who redefined forgiveness, the man who changed death forever, the man on the cross. And, of course, at Easter, we'll celebrate the man who lives. But I want to kick off this series on Mondays and Tuesdays called Who is This Man? Looking at the man who is bigger than religion. The man who is bigger than religion. Friends, most people don't reject Jesus. They reject religion. They reject hypocrisy. They reject judgment without compassion. They reject feeling like they never measure up. But here's the surprising truth, friends. Jesus rejected religion too, at least the kind that blocks people from God. I mean, what you think about this? Imagine if you walked into a hospital here in Central Kentucky and you saw a sign that says, emergency room only for healthy people. I mean, that wouldn't make any sense, would it? Yet that's how people often experience both church and faith. Get better, then you belong here. Friends, Jesus came to flip that message. And man, I want to share several ways that he did that. We'll look at a couple today and a couple more tomorrow. But first and foremost, Jesus, he moved towards the broken. Jesus moved towards the broken. A lot of what I'll be sharing over the next 6-7 weeks comes off a wonderful book called Who is This Man by John Ortberg. And, he does such a great job just looking at Jesus and just how he changed everything. If you're looking for a good read this spring, man, I want to encourage you to get a copy of that book. But I'm also sharing a lot of what I've learned in my over 40 years as a follower of Jesus about how Jesus was a man who was bigger than religion. And the first thing that Jesus did to flip that message was that Jesus moved towards the broken. He moved towards the broken. In Mark chapter 2, verses 13 and 14 says, Then Jesus went out to the lakeshore again and taught the crowds that were coming to him. As he walked along, he saw Levi, or Matthew as we know him now, son of Alphaeus, sitting at his tax collector's booth. Jesus said, Follow me and be my disciple. And Matthew got up and he followed Jesus. Friends, this is a big deal. Back then, tax collectors, they were known as traitors. They worked for Rome, the government there. They extorted their own people. I mean, nobody liked them. And, if Jesus is getting ready to start a movement, Matthew would be the last person that you would recruit. And yet, I love that Jesus didn't do things the way that man would do them. Aren't you thankful for that today? But here's the deal, friends. Jesus didn't avoid Matthew, even though of all things we shared about how despicable that tax collectors were then. And yet, Jesus said, hey, Matthew, I want you to be a part of my team. I mean, what you think about that? If you're a kid in Kentucky and you grow up being a basketball fan, gotten a coach, you call from Coach Joe B. Hall or, Eddie Sutton, Tubby Smith, Rick Pitino, John Calipari, now Mark Pope. I mean, to be asked to be on that team as a Kentucky would be amazing. But think about it, Jesus is picking his team, the Son of God, the ultimate team. And you would never think that he would pick somebody like Matthew. Man, I'm so thankful that Jesus took misfits just like you and me, people that weren't the religious people, but said, hey, follow me and I'll change your heart. I'll change your life. I'll change your destiny. And, if Jesus were choosing disciples today, just the people he chose, a lot of them would be despised. And yet that was the ones that Jesus said, you're exactly who I want. And aren't you thankful, friends, for grace? Oh, my goodness. Because grace is always shocking. We kind of get out our measuring stick about who God should extend grace to. Yet I want to remind you, the grace that you've been extended, that I've been extended. But here's what I know, friends, that Jesus meets us in our brokenness. I love Billy Graham said, our God isn't afraid of tears. He's especially drawn to those who feel forgotten, invisible, and overwhelmed. To the one who is grieving, he is your consolation. To the one battling anxiety, he is your peace. Friends, we've got these 3 signs. They're invisible signs, but if you come to Gardenside Christian Church, where I've been humbled and honored to be pastor for the last 3.5 years, I'll occasionally hold up this sign. It's not one we have hanging around, but it says simply, come as you are. And that's what Jesus does, friends. He wants you just to come as you are to him with your doubts. If you feel forgotten, if you feel invisible, if you're overwhelmed with life, if you're battling anxiety, if you're struggling with addiction, Jesus says, hey, man, just come to me as you are. Not wait until you have it all together. That's when we think we have it together. It's when we kind of develop an ego, EGO, and we start edging God out. And yet Jesus said, hey, come to me. The second thing that we need to know, and this is another sign that it's not a physical sign, but one that we hope that people feel in their hearts and minds and see it in our lives there at Gardenside Christian in Lexington, is that grace happens. Grace happens. You're never too far from God, friends, for him to redeem your life. Anne Lamott says, I do not at all understand the mystery of grace, only that it meets us where we are, but does not leave us where it found us. Oh, it's so good. Let's share that again. Anne Lamott said, I do not at all understand the mystery of grace, only that it meets us where we are, but does not leave us where it found us. Oh, friends, aren't you thankful for that today? I know I am. And a third sign that you need to know for your heart and your life that we have at Gardenside, not a physical sign, but one we just want people to know as they enter our campus and as they worship and they just meet people, is that you matter to God. You matter to God. You may feel like you don't matter to anyone else. It's interesting, 46% of our population is single, divorced, or widowed. So that means if you're in the checkout line at Kroger, either the person in front of you or behind you, there's a good chance that they're in that category, single, divorced, or widowed. Yet, friends, I know married people, they're not physically alone, but they're emotionally and mentally alone. They feel alone. They don't feel like they matter to anybody. And friends, I want to remind you that by God sending his one and only son, Jesus, God is saying, you matter to me. You matter so much to me that I'm sending my best, my one and only son, Jesus Christ, to die a horrific, brutal death upon a cross. John chapter 3, verse 16, probably the most famous Bible verse known throughout the world. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but shall have everlasting life. But friends, sometimes we forget about that great gift of Jesus. I'm so thankful for verse 17 because unfortunately sometimes we think, God's just waiting for me to catch me doing something wrong, or man, being a follower of Jesus, all it is about following rules, those 10 commandments. Yeah, friends, I want to remind you in verse 17 that most of us stop at John 3:16 says, for God sent his son into the world not to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. And friends, there's a difference in condemnation and conviction. I've learned in my over 20, almost 25 years now doing ministry, the number one thing that I've noticed, friends, is people are harder on themselves than God is. Yet I also know that God, when we're doing things that are getting off the rails, we're getting outside of the boundaries he's put in, which are to help us and to protect us, that he will convict us. He will convict us. And I'm thankful for that, friends. I'm also thankful the Bible says God disciplines those he loves. I remember growing up as a child, we had a weeping willow tree in our front yard. And occasionally, because I was being a bad boy, my mom or dad would get a weeping willow little branch, not a big one, a small little branch off that, and they would whip me with it. And you know what? I deserved every one of them. And I'm thankful they did that, because they didn't do it often. But when they did it, they let me know they meant business, and their yes meant yes, and their no meant no. So thankful for that, friends. Billy Graham says, seasons affected by addiction, depression, betrayal, divorce, or despair are not beyond God's reach. They are like seeds in his hands. Charles Stanley, one of my heroes of the faith. You can hear him on WJMM, 9 a.m. to 9:30, Monday through Friday. Really encourage you to check it out. He says, after brokenness, our lives can be more fruitful, more purposeful, and more joyful. Friends, I found to be true in my life and thousands of others that I've got to know through doing ministry over 20 years, that God works through the brokenness to help our lives become more joyful, fruitful, and purposeful, as Charles Stanley says. And then Lisa Turkhurst, I love this quote from her. Broken is what people are. Beautiful is what God makes them. Friends, if you're broken today, man, I'm glad that you're listening to this program or that you're watching it on our YouTube channel. I want to encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's simply Hope is Here, and my name, Greg Horn. And that this is a safe place for you to come every day and listen to our programs. And most of them we have a YouTube video of. Sometimes we don't. That's because of technical difficulties, which is my fault 99% of the time. But I hope you'll subscribe to our YouTube channel, and hundreds of programs on there that you can just keep your tank filled every day of the week, and even several times through the day if you want. Listen to one, watch one in the morning, watch one at night. Obviously, we have podcasts, too, of every program. Sometimes YouTube channel, we just have, we probably have about 80% of our programs there. A second thing that Jesus did was he built tables, not fences. Oh, man, that's so big. I don't want to get too far into that because we've only got about 45 seconds left. But, Jesus wanted to bring people together, not separate them. And man, the religious leaders, they were really good at separating people and, being very, very legalistic. And it just breaks my heart, friends, that, people, as I shared earlier, feel like they have it all together where they can show at church on Sundays. And that's why I was so important when I shared a while ago that, just come as you are. And secondly, grace happens. You're never too far from God to come back home. Well, unfortunately, out of time. But if you've been blessed by this program, I hope you'll share it with somebody else. But I hope you'll join us again tomorrow as we look at the man who is bigger than religion. My name is Greg Horn, and you've been listening to Hope is Here.